to become a
4:30 p.m. And it's made up of 2 evidence showcases. The first one is on integrated economic corridors in practice, and the second one is on regional public goods. So without further ado, I would like to invite the moderator of the session, the overall moderator of the session, who is going to give us a framing, scene-setting presentation and moderate the first panel. And then after that, we are going to have another moderator for the second panel. And then the overall moderator will come and close the session. So I'd like to invite onto the stage Dr. Rufael Fasil, the Division Manager, Power, Energy, Climate Change and Green Growth, Private Sector, Infrastructure and Industrialization, and Integration Evaluations at IDEV. Dr. Rufael is a development economist with over 20 years of experience specializing in evaluations and results-based management in international development. He's currently Division Manager in the Independent Evaluation Department at AfDB, IDEV. And then next, I'm going to invite Mr. Joseph Mwanda, who is the Chief Evaluation Officer at IDEV. He's a statistician economist by training, and he has served as Chief Evaluation Officer at IDEV for nearly 25 years. He leads sector, thematic, impact, and project performance evaluations of FDP-funded infrastructure, including energy, transport, and water supply. We have 2 participants that are joining us online. The first one is Mr. Mzianda Mbuseli. He's a Market Surveillance Manager, Southern Africa Power Pool, and he holds this position. He has 20 years of experience in the electricity industry. He has held various positions in power, utility, private sector, and now at the Southern Africa Power Pool. The second participant online is Engineer Daniel Cherono, who's the Director, Planning, Research and Compliance at the Kenya National Highways Authority. And Daniel is a civil engineer. He has 24 years experience across the full project cycle, including leading several MDP-funded projects. So at this point, I would like to hand over to Dr. Rufael Fasil to make his scene-setting presentation and facilitate the first discussion. Thank you. And just as an announcement, because we have participants joining us online, we are not going to be breaking for a coffee break so that they can be able to participate in the block of 2 hours. However, if you want to maybe step out and take a coffee, you can just go upstairs, have a cup, and then come back. And also after we finish, you'll be able to go and have some refreshments before you go home. So please feel free and enjoy the session. Thank you.
Good afternoon. For those online, good morning from US, some colleagues joining us, and also good evening for those other regions. Thank you very much. There was a change in the program, so it's supposed to be, the framing would be delivered by Dr. Joy. But the program is changed, so I have 2 hats. So the first one, I will be setting the scene and then moderating. It's a bit hot, so I left my coat. So I apologize. Yeah, thank you. So please, yeah. So I'll talk quickly about why we are here this afternoon, just so that we are on the same page and we're going to have a good deliberation. So as Christine mentioned, we are here, how do we scale regional impact? And today morning, we had a very interesting conversation, very passionate in terms of how do we scaling the impact. And here, the session focused only 2 streams, that is the integrated economic corridor and then the regional public goods. So we have 2 sessions. Next slide, please. So just to start, earlier also mentioned, I think it's good always when we look Africa not in a vacuum. We look Africa within the, in the world compared to other regions where we stand. So I think it's very important. Africa is the least we trade each other. We are only 50% trade each other compared to in Europe, they trade 70%. And, Asia and Americans, they trade much. So one thing to emphasize is that there is a significant gap. Infrastructure are enablers. At the end of the day, what's very important, transformational impact is one, as earlier we mentioned about the different building blocks. Trade is very important. And we're going to have a session in the 2 sessions we talked about, in terms of facilitation of trade as part of the economic corridors. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. So the second point is that we have already planned. So as earlier mentioned this morning, Africa is the only region. So far, I researched that we have 50 years agenda, and now it's expiring in 2063. Whereas Europe, they have the 2040, Asia, they have 2045. We have vision. We have a lot of, agreement, strategy, but what's very important is that delivery. So our conversation here today about how we can make it work. So if you see the map, in Africa, we have some in dashboards, you see some plans already even a decade ago, but still we are struggling. Some of them are working well. So the team will, in the first session, they will present what works, what's not working, how can we do better on this area. So I think here I want to highlight is that it's very important that delivery is key. Next slide, please. And when you look about connectivity, I think let's not underestimate. Significantly, we are, like, if you see the numbers, we are far, far behind. Even the world average, compared to the world average, we are far behind. So I think infrastructure is important, both the hardware and the software, but I think it's good to see the magnitude of the problem. And I think when we deep dive on the ongoing projects, the evaluation, we did the evaluation of our infrastructure, both transport and energy. And we have also panelists, they are presenting from Eastern and Southern Africa region. There are initiatives to bridge this gap. But still here, I want to emphasize is that the magnitude, the gap is huge. Next slide, please. And here is also, I think Morning also talked about the financing volume. There is a resource. But I think in terms of readiness, in terms of having bankable pipeline, and compared to ongoing investment in infrastructure, compared to both with other world in terms of roads and in terms of also power, there is a significant gap. And the second session will cover and discuss a bit deep dive from their experience. What are the success factors? What works and what didn't work? And and then they come up with some promising solution. How do we fast track? The next slide, please. So I think this is the key message. I think what we are doing is that earlier we talked about high level, and there are some practical discussion we had. But I think the key question is, what is, if we don't scaling up the impact? So what is the cost of the inaction? If we don't do anything, what is the cost? I think it's good to understand, to really, especially for policymaker, And those who really, come up with solution, it has significant impact in terms of economic, in terms of social development. If you see, latest figure shows that if we are enacting, at least we lose 2 points in our GDP growth in Africa region. And connectivity is a significant issue I don't want to highlight, this we have, and this has implication for human development, outcomes. And then in terms of power, even existing power pool, we are not using to the maximum. We are underutilizing this, and we need to find a way to work. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, this session, the next two sessions, will focus on, when I moderate the first session, I emphasize upon to focus on, we want to focus more delivery, not aspiration, not high-level thing, but practical solution. What does the evidence show? And what are the critical success factors, driver of this success? And then promising scalable solutions. Sometimes they are good solutions, but is it scalable? So I think that's very important. And last is that, how do we do better in the future? So I think this is our conversation will focus on. So I will invite the first presenter, Baze, to take the floor, and I will make sure that they talk to these key 4 questions. Thank you. Is Mbazi connected or? Yes. Please take the floor. Sorry, there is some technical.
Good afternoon, Program Director. I'm just confirming if I am audible.
Yeah. It's audible. Go ahead.
Thank you very much and good afternoon. Thank you for inviting the Southern African Power Pool to share our experiences under the subject matter. Just briefly, the contents of the presentation, a brief background about the Southern African Power Pool, our membership, and then the interconnectors, particularly focusing on the projects and the status. Then lastly, the challenges and opportunities and hoping to address the objectives of the session. Just briefly, program moderator, the Southern African Power Pool, we are an agency of the Southern African Development Community responsible for cross-border energy trading. We cover the 12 countries in SADC, mainly the SADC mainland states, excluding the SADC oceanic states. Approximately a population of about 418 million people. Our installed generation capacity around 83 gigawatts. And we were created in 1995 for the purpose of facilitating cross-border electricity trading, planning of the interconnected power system, as well as the operation of the interconnected power system, And last but not least, to ensure that we increase access, affordable access to modern forms of electricity to our communities. In terms of membership, we have currently 28 members across 3 different membership categories. One being the National Power Utility, which is the category entrusted by the states, the SADC states, for the ownership of the Southern African Power Pool. We have 12 countries, the mainland countries, the National Power Utilities. We then have an operating member where we have 6 members. These are members who are operating a plant of minimum 300 megawatt, and they are operating a high voltage transmission line interconnected in the Southern African grid. Then lastly, with the development of competitive markets, cross-border trade, we have market participant category, which allows for the private sector, the independent power producers, independent transmission companies to participate in cross-border energy trading in the Southern African Power Pool. That's our newest category. We have 10 members there. And additionally, we have what is called conditional membership, where we have 14 members. This category is aimed at the developers that are still developing their power plants or their transmission lines, where we give them conditional membership after having met some conditions. And we give them 5 years to then complete their power plant and then migrate to the market participant category. And this was all done to attract the private sector into the cross-border trading space in the region. Then coming to the crux of the discussion today, mainly focusing on the regional transmission projects across the Western Corridor, the Central Corridor, as well as the Eastern Corridor in the region. Moderator, we've got 3 types of projects or project categories. The first one being projects that are aimed at interconnecting the non-operating members. Currently, out of the 12 countries, we've got Angola, Malawi, Tanzania that are not yet interconnected and therefore not yet able to participate in cross-border trading with the rest of the membership of the Southern African Power Pool. So we've got priority projects that are aimed at interconnecting these 3 members. Secondly, we have projects that are aimed at relieving the transmission congestion, both interconnectors as well as domestic networks, particularly in the central corridor of our region, which is the corridor from South Africa, Botswana, through Zimbabwe into Zambia and the DRC. We have major transmission constraints in that corridor, and we have projects that are aimed at relieving that transmission constraint. And lastly, we've got transmission projects that aim to move power from new generation stations into load centers. So this would typically then be a transmission line that is linked to a generation facility and aimed at evacuating that power. If I may as well mention that we do have a regional transmission infrastructure financing facility that we are busy establishing as the Southern African Power Pool as a fund to help us fund transmission interconnectors. And this fund is really born out of what we call the congestion income, which is the income that we collect out of the day-ahead market where the market splits due to transmission constraints. And the market operator collects that income, and the power pool has made the decision that that income should be plowed back into relieving transmission constraints. And this is why we are using that seed funding into the RTIF project. Then a bit of detail in terms of the various corridors, starting on the Eastern Corridor. We've got 3 projects that are under construction at the moment, that being the Zambia-Tanzania interconnector that links the Southern African Power Pool into the East African Power Pool. And when that line comes into operation, anticipated in 2029, it will link the 2 power pools and allow for trading to happen basically from Cape Town all the way to Cairo. And this is the line that we are putting effort in and very much excited about it. Secondly, we've got the Mozambique-Malawi interconnector that's under construction, final stages of construction. We're expecting this line to be commissioned in the last quarter of 2025. 2026, this current calendar year. We are excited about that line because it will then bring, for the first time, Malawi into interconnection and allow Malawi to then trade power with the rest of the Southern African region. Then on the western side, we've got Namibia-South Africa line that is under construction that will then strengthen the western corridor between South Africa and Namibia, and later on linking to the Angola-Namibia line, as well as the lines from Namibia into Zambia. Those are the projects that are under construction at the moment. And then second type of projects, we've got 7 projects where feasibility studies have been completed and they are marked on this slide, as well as 8 projects where feasibility studies are still ongoing. Just some further detail in terms of the projects that we have at different stages of the project life cycle, from concept stage running through all the way to construction stage. We've got a number of projects that are at various stages that we are facilitating and coordinating as the Southern African Power Pool on the transmission side. And as mentioned, we've got 4 currently that are under construction, including a Mokoni substation, which is part of the Zimbabwe, Zambia, Botswana, Namibia circle of interconnectors. Then program moderator, coming to what we have experienced as a Southern African Power Pool as we work on these various projects in terms of challenges. We have observed that there's usually competing interests between national plans versus regional priorities. And that's something that has led to delays in some of the projects that we are dealing with, where national plans seem to supersede regional priorities, indicating a need for regional planning and regional execution of projects that could benefit more than one country at a time. Secondly, different legal and regulatory frameworks, they've also posed a challenge to the projects, talking to the issues of transmission transmission pricing, where we've got different regimes and regulatory frameworks that apply in the different countries. Then limited funding for the full project cycle, where it takes so long to get approvals and authorizations from environmental and social impacts, where by the time you get to a certain stage, some of the authorizations have expired and studies need to be updated again. Then investor appetite for projects in various countries. We've also observed that some investors would prefer projects in some countries and not projects in other countries for various reasons. And lastly, then the borrowing capacity of different member states. We've also observed that the borrowing capacity in terms of balance sheets of either the utilities or the member states also leads to delay in some of the projects that we are dealing with. Then moving on to opportunities. In the Southern African Power Pool, we have established what is called the Project Advisory Unit, funded by the World Bank. And this is the unit that has helped us to progress some of these projects that I've just spoken about, where we use this funding to do the various studies and progress the project all the way up to bankability. And this has been a game changer in terms of assisting us to advance projects in the region. Secondly, we have demand and supply deficit in the region. So we do have market for power across the borders in the region. So there's definitely demand for the power and therefore the need to expedite projects. We've got various markets as the SEP. We've got a month ahead market, week ahead, day ahead market, intraday, balancing market. So there is platforms for power exchange in the region, which then presents an opportunity over and above bilateral contracts for moving the power across the borders in the region. As mentioned, we participate in AfSEM, looking forward to the SEP EAPP integration and market coupling, which will then also widen the market and widen the scope of or the impact of regional integration. Private sector participation, as presented as the SEP, we've opened up to private sector participation, and we are accepting more and more members to come into the SEP. Similarly, with investors and financier appetite, we believe that where projects are packaged properly, there is funding available out there. We just need to make sure that we package and prepare projects accordingly. Lastly, Chair, in terms of the lessons we have learned in the region is that regional master planning is critical to make sure that we avoid issues of conflicts between national versus regional priorities. Similarly, project coordination is very important, and we've observed this in the Southern African Power Pool, that when we established the project advisory unit, we've seen the impact and the step change in the rate at which we are progressing projects, as well as the coordination of co-funding of the various projects. Session Director, thank you very much. This is our submission for today. I hope that I managed to keep within the time limit. Thank you. I submit.
Thank you, Ms. Anda. I think you really, this is one of a success story. And I think what's interesting about this initiative is that it layers different components. It's not just a power pool. There are soft and hardware, market, capacity building. I think if we want to make a difference, to make really change or this regional integration, I think we need to look not just the infrastructure, we have to go beyond that. Thank you very much. So I'll go to the second presenter. It's also this one is from Eastern Africa, already introduced by Christine. Daniel, floor is yours. Over to you.
Good evening from Nairobi, Kenya. I want to ask whether I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Thank you very much. And as I wait for my screen to come up, I first of all want to say that I want to make a presentation of perhaps one of our best or one of our most successful projects that we've implemented in this part of East Africa region. This project is complete as we speak. And it is good as you, in your opening remarks, you did indicate that we need evidence, we need to know the critical success factors, the solutions that were applied to this project during the implementation. And we'll also try to suggest what we should do differently as we move along. Are my slides visible?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So as we
wait a minute. Sorry.
Yeah.
IT, please.
Are we good?
Wait, please. Yeah, you can proceed.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, this project is a multinational Mombasa-Nairobi Addis Ababa corridor. And just to put a context on the project itself, you can see the map on the left. You can see the port of Mombasa, which is highlighted. And in between, there is Isiolo, right in the middle of Kenya. Then you have Moyale and Addis Ababa at the top. Now, for a very long time, Kenya and Ethiopia did not have a reliable connection. So therefore, it was difficult for movement between the city of Isiolo at that point all the way to Addis Ababa, because this section remained largely unpaved. And this section totals about 500 kilometers. And it was largely in very poor condition. To the right of my slide is a map of Kenya, and that puts the context of why trade could not thrive in this point to connect Kenya and Ethiopia, because of the link between that point, Isiolo, all the way to Moyale. Now, a project was conceived between the two countries, and being part of the Trans-African Highway Network, the project was intended to upgrade the sections that were in poor condition, and this was aimed to promote trade, integrate the region, alleviate poverty through this highway infrastructure project. Now, during the preparation of the project, it was expected that by upgrading this section, part of this section in Kenya and part of the section in Ethiopia between Moyale all the way to Hawassa, the two countries would have a faster and a safer transport corridor and increase the trade between the two countries. It was also anticipated that livelihoods and economic inclusion for the communities living along the road corridor or the project corridor were going to benefit from this project. Now, this was also aligned to the African Development Bank strategy of the year 2004, running up to 2008 and 2008 all the way to 2012, and also the Kenya Vision 2030. And these project objectives were well aligned within those key strategies. Now, the photograph I've projected presents the actual situation on the ground before the implementation of this project. You can see the problem, the situation that was then, and this really explains why integration between the two countries, Kenya and Ethiopia, and trade could not thrive, because such conditions which you see in that photograph would not allow that to happen. So before investment or at the baseline, at the time of the preparation of the project, the road was extremely in poor condition. It used to take between 3 and 5 days to cover up to the 500 kilometers between Isiolo all the way to Moyale. And therefore, there was no integration. You could not cross to Ethiopia by road. Now, this transport was also quite unreliable, because during the wet seasons, it was not possible for motorists to be able to traverse that point. And even the kind of vehicles that were used, the quality of movement was extremely poor, because the only available means of movement along that corridor was using trucks. Traders living, doing business within Marsabit and Moyale towns north of Nairobi were incurring very high freight costs, which were among the highest in the East African region, almost 3 times. There was also constrained cross-border trade. Of course, one of the other significant issues that persisted at that time was insecurity, because motorists would get stuck and robberies and banditry would take place, and therefore it discouraged any movement along that section. So during the preparation of this project, the key risks that were anticipated was the issue of the weak trade between the two countries. This is Kenya and Ethiopia. And insecurity was also going to play a very serious or significant challenge to the implementation of those projects. And of course, after rolling out the full 500 kilometers of road, that would significantly increase the paved network in the country. And there was also the risk of sustaining that asset in terms of maintenance. So the issue of neglected maintenance also arose during the preparation, and this is something that was discussed at length. There was also a risk of delay in implementation of the project, considering the significant scope and the scale of that project. And because the northern area, the northern part of the country, there are a lot of social issues. So delay in implementation of RAP was also identified as a key risk. Of course, that would come with cost overruns, and the issue of climate change impacts was also noted during the preparation of the project. Now, what was done was to phase the project in 3 phases. There was phase one, which was to address the first 136 kilometers of road. The second phase was to address another section of 122 kilometers of road. Then there was a phase 3 and phase 4. Now, there was other complementary initiatives that were also rolled out because the northern part of the country of Kenya experienced a significant problem or significant challenge of availability of water. And therefore, there was need to sink sufficient boreholes to and do water pumps so that you could supply construction teams with sufficient water for construction of those roads. Now, for the issue of enhancing trade between the two countries, Kenya and Ethiopia, a one-stop border post was envisioned, and a border post at Moyale was actually implemented. There was, because of also the the lengthy section between Isiolo all the way going to Moyale, it was necessary to have roadside rest stations. And also to protect the asset, there was need to have way bridges. So these were complementary soft infrastructure that were really, really necessary to ensure that this project was delivered and served its purpose. And a total investment of close to $500 million US was invested in the corridor. This is the situation as it is at the moment. You can see, you can compare the two photographs that we had before. A beautiful road running for the 500 kilometers between Isiolo all the way up to Moyale, properly maintained. You could see the quality of the vehicles that are now using that road. They are buses. There's ease of transport. We now have security on the road. You can drive without any issue. And as we move along, this is a one-stop border post that was implemented or constructed at Moyale. The border between Kenya and Moyale is almost at that point around the Moyale River. This facility is on the Kenyan side. These other facilities on the Ethiopian side. And the two facilities sit side by side to operate as a one-stop border post that ensures seamless movement of the traffic and trade across the border. In terms of impact, initially it used to take 3 to 5 days to travel between Nairobi all the way to Moyale. I must say, immediately we completed the project, there was an 85% reduction in the travel time. So between Isiolo and Moyale, there is now certainty that you can drive between 6 and 8 hours to cover the 500 kilometers on a very good infrastructure. Public transport fares have significantly dropped. You are talking about 55% reduction. The buses and the trucks which used to operate once a week would now have a turnaround of about 4 trips in a week. And of course, there is significant reduction in terms of haulage costs on that section of the road. I picked this slide, this notice recently after the increase of the fuel prices occasioned by the geopolitical issues that have been happening around the Middle East. And you can notice that even then, there is no much difference in terms of the fares, the bus fares, and you can also see the quality of the buses or the two means of transport that the road users are able to do. And some of these buses actually ply between Nairobi all the way to Addis Ababa. So as key takeaways, there have been a real significant reduction in travel times between Nairobi all the way to Moyale. Interregional trade between Kenya, and this is what is measured at the one-stop border post, has grown by about 54%. Now, this project has given us a rate of return of about 27, which is really, really impressive. And you can see the net NPV for that project, and this actually shows this was an investment which was worthwhile. And as we implement as we maintain the project, we have quite a number of performance-based contracts to take care of this road. We have output-based contracts, and a total of 8 contractors are working on that section. We are talking of significant benefits to the community in terms of the boreholes, the water pumps that were actually done during the construction of the project, and they were taken over by the communities. And some of these are actually helping the community during the dry seasons. Now, in terms of the value chains, we are looking at livestock and meat because this area is predominantly a pastoralist area. Horticulture around the highlands of Marsabit reached Nairobi now within 24 hours, and there is no waste. We have transit cargo going all the way to Ethiopia. And what is also very, very important is the growth of the the MSMEs, the medium small enterprises. So initially at the baseline, before the implementation of this project for entire section of the 500 kilometers, we were looking at about 1,000 of them. Now it has grown by almost 400%. And what is also very critical is the quality of these businesses that are coming up. Of course, women have been empowered more, and they are much more into the informal trade along the road. And this has been one of the significant issues that benefits that the project has brought on board. I just want to run through some of the lessons that we've learned and why this project we were able to deliver this project on good time. I must say that during the implementation of this project, we actually were able to do these projects within within the scope that was required, within reasonable time. There was no significant delays, and within also the budget. Now, one of the key issues that was very important was the preparation for this project. I indicated earlier on that this project was segmented into 4 sections, which was much more manageable. So the planning phase of the project actually, took into consideration all the risks that I highlighted earlier on. There was sufficient funding. There were phased project implementation. And one section which was funded by the African Development Bank financed 3 sections. The European Union financed 1 section. And what was really, really critical was also the coordination between the financiers, the different financiers who were handling the different sections of the road. Now, adequate stakeholder management was also key, and this involved engaging the relevant government, community, NGOs, and this really paid off because the project was accepted by the communities living around there, and it was easy to implement the project. Now, there was also a Kenya-Ethiopia Multinational Technical Coordination Committee, which was composed by the different players along the corridor. We are talking about the revenue authorities. We are talking about the road agencies, Ethiopian Roads Authority and the Kenya National Highways Authority. There was also the ministry, there was immigration, and all the other agencies around the border who really facilitated in terms of giving the support to enable the construction of especially the one-stop border post. There was also a competent and effective project management team, and I must say that the team from the bank played a very key role together with that of the executing agency and the project coordination team. So there was quite a bit of synergy. There was very little delay in decision making from both sides, and therefore it is good that we have strong and supportive institutions that are able to get the project moving at all stages. There was also proper contract management. This is also critical in terms of selecting the proper supervision, the consultants. You are looking at contractors who are competent and capable of handling projects, especially in the areas where these projects were carried out. And as I said, we were able to deliver this project within the scope that was required, within reasonable time, within cost, and with the quality that was required under that project. There was also proactive and timely access to site for the contractors, but critical is the adherence to the resettlement action plan that had been agreed at the beginning of the project. And also, of course, the issues of safeguards. This was an area which was perceived as marginalized, and there was also need to have strong social safeguards so that we could gain the acceptability by the communities. What is critical after delivering the project is the sustainable maintenance through performance-based contracts and also community involvement throughout the implementation of the project. So I just want to wrap up by saying that this is a project really that we've learned also a lot of lessons that we are implementing in other areas, but it is also good to have this discussion so that the solutions that were deployed to ensure that this project was successful are also utilized in other projects. So, moderator, I thank you, and I end my presentation at that point. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Engineer Daniel. I think I know this project, one of success, especially started when it started just on road delivery, and then build upon other necessary condition. So, some of the numbers are impressive. The cut the traffic by 85%, trade grows by 54%. It's very impressive. But we will have a few questions, but it's very interesting. Like also, we have a challenge from project to project. Always sustainability is an issue, and they have a maintenance model. They try to operationalize, and it will be interesting to learn later. Thank you, Engineer Daniel. So now let me invite the last presenter, Joseph from IDEV. Over to you, Joseph.
Okay. Hello. Bonjour ou bon après-midi. Aujourd'hui, je ne vais pas seulement vous parler de routes, de ports, de rails, de lignes électriques. Je vais parler des systèmes. Les systèmes qui permettent aux personnes, aux marchandises et à l'électricité de circuler et au-delà des frontières. Mon intervention s'articulera autour de 3 questions. Qu'est-ce qui a fonctionné? Qu'est-ce qui a moins bien fonctionné? Et quels enseignements devraient guider les futurs investissements dans les infrastructures régionales? Next slide. IDEV a rassemblé des données probantes issues des évaluations du soutien de la BAD aux corridors de transport, aux interconnexions électriques et celles relatives au changement climatique. L'objectif n'était pas seulement de savoir si les infrastructures avaient été réalisées, mais aussi de comprendre si elles avaient produit des services viables, réduit les coûts, renforcé l'intégration régionale et généré des résultats de développement plus résilients. Le prisme d'analyse est donc clair. Il s'agit d'aller au-delà des actifs physiques et examiner si l'infrastructure fonctionne comme un système, un véritable système. Next slide. Alors, ce que IDEV a fait, en fait, les bases de données probantes et substantielles dans le secteur des transports. IDEV a examiné plus d'une décennie de l'appui de la BAD, de 2012 à 2023. L'évaluation couvre 258 opérations, dont 44 pays, pour un montant total d'environ 14 milliards d'unités de compte. Elle offre ainsi une vision complète du soutien de la banque aux routes, aux rails, aux ports, à l'aviation et au transport urbain. Pour les interconnexions électriques, IDEV a examiné des projets régionaux d'interconnexion dans 13 pays, couvrant plusieurs liaisons transfrontalières. Sur le plan méthodologique, IDEV a utilisé une approche fondée sur la théorie du changement et des méthodes mixtes. L'évaluation a combiné l'analyse du portefeuille, des études de cas, des évaluations des projets et des évaluations groupées, et une analyse comparative ainsi qu'une analyse géospatiale. Next slide. Ce que les investissements de la BAD dans le transport ont produit. Les données probantes montrent que les investissements de la BAD dans le transport ont généré des résultats importants. Les corridors prioritaires ont réduit les temps de trajet, renforcé la connectivité régionale et soutenu les échanges commerciaux. Les postes frontaliers à guichet unique ont aussi réduit les délais de passage et les coûts de transit lorsqu'ils étaient pleinement opérationnels. Dans les villes, les systèmes de transport structurés, comme les BRT, ont amélioré la mobilité. Les investissements dans le rail et l'aviation ont contribué à l'efficacité opérationnelle et la sécurité. Les données satellitaires montrent également une hausse de l'activité économique le long de certains corridors améliorés. Le message est donc positif. Les infrastructures appuyées par la BAD ont contribué à la connectivité, au commerce, à la mobilité et à l'activité économique. Mais ces résultats ont été plus solides lorsque les infrastructures étaient soutenues par une bonne exploitation, des institutions efficaces, une maintenance adéquate et une coordination renforcée. Next slide. Principale constatation issue des interventions de la BAD dans les secteurs des transports. L'une des principales constatations est la suivante. L'infrastructure produit des meilleurs résultats lorsqu'elle est gérée comme un système de services régional fonctionnel et non comme un seul actif construit. Les actifs physiques ont donné les meilleurs résultats lorsqu'ils étaient accompagnés des systèmes logistiques et numériques, de diagnostic de corridors et de dispositifs institutionnels solides. À l'inverse, dans certains cas, l'approche est restée trop centrée sur l'actif. Les infrastructures ont été réalisées, mais les systèmes de soutien, comme les règles de maintenance, la logistique, les processus numériques et la coordination transfrontalière sont restés insuffisants. Les faiblesses récurrentes concernaient notamment la maintenance, la gestion des actifs, l'application des règles de charge à l'issue pour les routes, la qualité des études de faisabilité, les délais de passation de marché, les questions foncières et les capacités institutionnelles. Next slide. De l'infrastructure au système de corridors intégrés. L'argument central pour passer des infrastructures au système de corridors intégrés est clair. Un corridor n'est pas seulement une infrastructure physique. C'est un système intégré qui permet de faire circuler les personnes, les marchandises, l'électricité, les services et l'information au-delà des frontières. Ce système repose sur plusieurs maillons: les actifs physiques, la logistique, le numérique, les règles, les institutions, le financement et les services rendus aux usagers. Si un maillon est faible, tout le corridor sous-performe. La règle de conception est simple. Partir des blocages réels du corridor et des besoins des usagers en associant les opérateurs et les utilisateurs dès le départ. Dans une perspective climat-développement, il convient de lier les corridors de transport à la résilience des bassins versants, des villes et de l'utilisation des sols, et lier les interconnexions électriques aux énergies renouvelables et à l'utilisation productive pour multiplier l'impact. Next slide. Les interconnexions électriques obéissent à la même logique, mais pour un service différent, une électricité fiable au-delà des frontières. Les interconnexions régionales peuvent améliorer la fiabilité, réduire les coûts du système et soutenir l'intégration des énergies renouvelables. Mais cela ne se produit que lorsque l'infrastructure s'accompagne de contrats d'achat d'électricité crédibles, d'une discipline tarifaire, de systèmes de règlement, d'une bonne santé financière des compagnies d'électricité et d'une confiance entre régulateurs et sociétés d'électricité. La ligne physique n'est qu'un maillon de la chaîne de valeur. La véritable valeur apparaît lorsque la production, le transport, la distribution, les règles de marché et l'usage productif sont alignés. La dimension climatique est également essentielle. Les futures interconnexions doivent être conçues pour résister au stress thermique, intégrer les énergies renouvelables variables, être prêt pour le stockage et soutenu des usages productifs. Next slide. Le changement climatique change la donne. Il ne s'agit plus de savoir si l'on peut construire une infrastructure, mais si elle pourra fonctionner sous pression climatique, budgétaire et institutionnelle. Cela exige 4 changements. Concevoir pour le climat futur, relier les secteurs et pas seulement les pays, en articulant les transports avec l'eau, les villes, l'utilisation des sols et l'énergie. Renforcer les institutions, la gouvernance et la viabilité financière. Et enfin, intégrer les risques financiers, institutionnels et environnementaux. Next slide. Que change l'infrastructure climato-intelligente? Une approche intelligente face au changement climatique change aussi le niveau d'ambition. Pour les corridors de transport, il ne s'agit plus seulement de construire des routes, mais de développer des systèmes multimodaux, rails, ports, voies navigables, transport de masse, etc. Pour les interconnexions électriques, il s'agit de concevoir des systèmes capables d'intégrer les énergies renouvelables, de résister aux chocs climatiques et de soutenir les usages productifs. Et pour les biens publics régionaux, cela signifie financer des systèmes partagés, institutions, règles communes, instruments de réduction des risques, confiance et coopération, et pas seulement des actifs physiques. Next slide. Les principaux enseignements tirés des évaluations ont trait à, premièrement, concevoir la résilience dès le départ afin d'éviter des rénovations coûteuses. Deuxièmement, financer la maintenance comme une priorité. Troisièmement, développer des solutions multimodales. Quatrièmement, planifier à partir de la demande réelle. Cinquièmement, concevoir avec les usagers, en particulier les femmes, afin d'améliorer la sécurité, l'accès et l'inclusion. Et enfin, renforcer les capacités locales. Pour conclure, je voudrais vous laisser avec un message central. Les données probantes sont claires. Les routes seules ne suffisent pas. Les lignes électriques seules ne suffisent pas. Ce sont les systèmes qui créent des véritables biens publics régionaux. La maintenance, le numérique, la gouvernance, le climat et la confiance transfrontalière ne sont pas des compléments. Ils sont aussi au cœur des infrastructures de demain. Nos évaluations montrent que les infrastructures soutenues par la BAD ont produit des résultats importants. Mais on a aussi noté que ces résultats sont plus solides lorsque l'infrastructure est conçue et gérée comme un système de service et non comme un actif isolé. Si nous voulons que la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine réussisse, que les pôles énergétiques tiennent leurs promesses et que la résilience climatique devienne une réalité, alors nous devons financer des systèmes, pas seulement des actifs. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Joseph. This is very comprehensive. For those who are aware, we looked at the last 10 years of transport and energy also. We looked 10 years. investment, and we have a thematic study on regional integration on the economic corridors. I think highlighted, I think for two things I just want to highlight is that one, sustainability again. I think what's the challenge we have with multilateral development banks, even with other bilateral or international organizations, is that we think about sustainability when we close the project, not from the beginning. So I think that's very important. Sustainability, planning for sustainability, financial or institutional, and other aspects of sustainability start when we start designing the initiative. I think that's very important. The second point is looking the system as a whole. Infrastructure, power, road, ports, railway, aviation, there are different infrastructure are a means to an end. They are not an end by itself. So we need to look system to work together to deliver that transformational impact. I think that's very important. With that, we have 20 minutes. So I have a quick follow-up question for three of them, one question, and then I'll open the floor. We have 10 minutes also plus for to get a question from the audience. Okay, so I will start with it's Mezinda from the Power Pool. Just reflecting back, you've been part of that pool for some time. What's striking you for you, like at most transformational impact? I think just not 1, 2, 3, just focus on the most like high level for you that in terms of trade or value chain or livelihood, what is just a success story, that one transformational impact? And I want you to be very specific, and then and just to ask you following, what made it possible for that transformational impact?
Thank you very much, session moderator, for the question. From our perspective as the Southern African Power Pool, let me reference the one interconnector that really led to the most impact in cross-border trading in the region. And that is the transmission line that runs from South Africa, Matimba Power Station, through into Botswana, Pokoche substation, and it goes into Zimbabwe, in Sugamini substation, and all the way through into Zambia via the Kariba lines and into the Democratic Republic of Congo. That line was commissioned in 1995, and it really opened up the north-south and south-north trades, electricity trades in the region. And that's really one of the flagship interconnectors. Interestingly, when the ministers responsible for energy in the region decided to form the Southern African Power Pool, we had the similar prevailing circumstances back then in the late 1980s, beginning of 1990s, where we had a drought in the region that affected hydropower station between Zambia and Zimbabwe, specifically the Kariba complex. And power needed then to move from the south into supporting the central part of the SADC region, Zimbabwe particularly, and Zambia. And today we are back again due to the hydrology and the drought in that situation where power is moving from south through into Botswana, Zambia, Zimbabwe, into Zambia to support the economy and the country of Zambia, given this drought that we are experiencing at the moment that has affected power generation in the Kariba complex. So this is a very specific example, which was one of the founding decisions of the Southern African Power Pool to complement each other, where we've got diversified sources of generation, mostly thermal in the south and hydro in the central part, and be able to assist each other during times such as these when we have hydrological issues in the region. So in the main, I'm citing this project as a project that really opened up power trading in the region to support the economies in the region, to support economic growth, support access to modern forms of electricity. And with that, bring about also the trading aspect in terms of the capacity, the skills of power trading in the region associated with that capacity to price energy properly, to value energy properly for trading purposes. And that skill has been established in the region at the moment. Let me stop here, moderator. I submit.
Thank you. Thank you. Engineer Daniel, for you, I think the same question. And just focus on, I mentioned about the trade, the time for travel, but beyond that, more transformational impact that for you as success of this, flagship initiative. And then just to also follow up, what make it possible for that transformational impact? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will say that the most really transformational impact of the project was integrating the northern part of our country, of Kenya, with the rest of the other country. And I will just say this quickly that, you would, before the project was implemented, you could go to the northern part of the country and somebody would ask you, how is Kenya? Yet you are in the same country. Now, the impact it has had on the communities, and this project actually happened during the advent of the new constitution for the country, which had devolved governments, has actually led to a huge growth in the economies of the counties and the communities living in the northern part of the country. So the quality of lives have improved. There are better hospitals. Now it's easy to go on tourism. Some of those issues which may not have been captured during the preparation of the project, but tourism is now big because there's a huge desert part in that part of the country. So there are a lot of other benefits that have accrued as from this project post completion of that project. So over and above what was envisaged at the beginning of the project, there's been, a snowball effect, a spiraling effect of other benefits that have accrued to the communities. Now, there are a lot of other new roads that have come as last mile because this is a main artery. So the demand for new infrastructure to join and to connect to this main road has also, significantly, come up. Issues of insecurity that I highlighted later on are things of the past. You don't need to go with a security escort to that part of the country now. And really, these are some of those, direct transformational issues that you feel this project has brought. And you may also be aware that, our country is also opening up another frontier between Isiolo going all the way to Mandera. And I think the bank is actively participating in financing some of those sections. And we are also drawing a lot of examples, examples from this project that has been implemented as lessons which were learned. And people can actually see, the communities can see the impact this corridor has had. And there's a huge demand for such kind to be replicated in the new projects that are coming up.
Thank you, Daniel. Maybe let me follow up. I think when we plan this kind of initiative, there are some risk factors, and especially we are in Africa, most of our, 24 countries in transition state, things change. So my question is that, as you know, during this lifetime of this initiative, there is a change in government in Kenya, the change in government in Ethiopia, and at the same time, we had COVID, the change, global change. So how do you navigate all these changes to realize this, transformational impact? Danny?
Yeah. So first of all, for you to navigate that problem, you must accept and you must be proactive and getting to understand from the onset that these changes are going to affect your project. And once those risks are going to affect your project, then there should be a proper risk mitigation plan that is drawn for the project to ensure that there is sustainability. Communication and timely information becomes extremely important, right from the project teams who are implementing the project on the ground, right through the executing agencies to the different stakeholders. And firm decisions need to be taken on a very, very timely basis as you implement the project. And that way you should be able to navigate the challenges that arise from this. I think one of the biggest challenges that we have at present is the escalation of prices in most of these projects. And I think this is really a threat to ongoing projects across the continent. The geopolitics, the issues of the issue of fluctuations of prices on the upper side, which continues to deplete the resources that are allocated to this project. What needs to happen is, you need to have clear communication, clear discussions, clear decision making at the onset without undue delay would really solve some of these issues that you've raised. Now, during the COVID period, of course, COVID was a lockdown. In our country, in Kenya, we made a decision, or the government made a decision that COVID was, that transport projects and all construction works which were going on as essential services. Now, this meant that we were not going to hold those projects during the construction, but take the necessary protocols to prevent workers and other people working on those projects from contracting the disease or getting. So those protocols were strictly followed. Sensitization happened during those periods, and the projects were able to proceed. So it's all about being proactive, and don't let us also not bury. Whenever these issues come, they are a threat to the projects, and we should not bury our heads in the sand.
Thank you, Engineer. Joseph, for you, you've been last 25 years, you've been doing evaluation. Most of infrastructure evaluation for the bank done by you. And my question is that if one lesson you want to advise the African continental free trade area, what is, in order this investment for economical corridor to work, what are the key lessons? What's your advice?
I think I already mentioned the fact that one of the lessons is that for the implementation of African continental free trade is that the implementation will require more than infrastructure construction. I already said it, but I will say also that the multimodality matter. The multimodality also matter. Because why I'm saying it's Africa, how can I say, over-reliance on road is not sufficient. Because road sometimes increase congestion, emission, vulnerability to climate shock, and maintenance costs. This is why the AFTA need corridor that connect road, rail, port, waterway, aviation, energy, and so on. So the first one, like I said, we need more than infrastructure. The second one, we need to go beyond road and include other means to have a multimodal. And finally, you say one lesson, but why not sharing more one? So finally, I think the regional governance determine also whether infrastructure translates into trade, because effective corridor require supranational or multi-country coordination mechanism, clear mandate, financial arrangement, and performance metric. Without this national procedure, fragmented regulation and weak implementation capacity will continue to delay trade and increase costs.
Thank you, Joseph. Let me open the floor. Any questions
Okay. My name is Hani Shalabi, and I work in the bank, PEC 2, in the climate change department. Okay. So thank you very much for the excellent presentation, both of them. Just a very quick question. There is a big contrast between the way climate change was mentioned and even used in the first presentation, which is the road between Ethiopia and Kenya. It was mentioned climate risk, like just one sentence, climate risk. And it said, I think it was used as a cost-cutting issue. Okay. In the second presentation, it was used in a different sense completely, a wholesome approach to climate change, including that the road should be considered a system where climate change is part of the system. Okay, and there is lots of prescriptions that you mentioned, including design roads for rising heats, whatever, and all the different things that you mentioned. Okay, so what do you think? I mean, you see the disparity in considering in the approach climate risk between two different projects. This is one thing. And then in the second presentation, don't you think that if we look at climate change this way, the way that you mentioned, it will increase the cost of the road by 25, 30%? And this is something that the bank would never accept. We have a lot of difficulty with this kind of things in when we support projects on climate change, because even telling them that we need to measure the emissions along the road, lots of people say, why do you have to do that? Why do you have to measure the emissions? Okay, so I think, but what you said is, you know, this is very ideal, and this is where we should reach at one time. What you said in the second presentation, and I liked it very much, but it's very difficult to get to this point.
Thank you.
OK, merci beaucoup pour vos présentations. Ma question s'adresse au premier intervenant. Bon, c'est Dr. Atse Kambo, docteur en gouvernance et intégration régionale de l'Université panafricaine, coordonnateur général du Pan-African Network of Young Researchers. La première question, c'est de demander la création du fonds régional destiné à renforcer les lignes de transmission électrique en Afrique australe a été créée en 2024. À combien s'élève ce fonds? C'est la première question. La deuxième question, 2 ans après la création de ce fonds, quels étaient les décaissements pour les pays concernés? Et la troisième question, est-ce que le Southern Africa Power Pool va s'agrandir avec l'adhésion des autres pays restants de la SADC? Puisque dans l'intervention, on a parlé de 12 pays, alors que la SADC, c'est 16 pays. Est-ce que le Madagascar va intégrer le Southern Africa Power Pool, puisqu'ils ont un problème d'énergie beaucoup au Madagascar? La deuxième question, c'est à la présentation de IDEV. Dans la méthodologie, je n'ai pas vu l'aspect approche qualitatif. Vous avez parlé de l'évaluation des projets, mais et l'aspect de l'appropriation des populations. Est-ce que quand les projets sont faits, vous avez parlé de plus de 10 ans de projets, est-ce que vous avez parti sur le terrain pour aller questionner les populations? Est-ce que les populations ont aimé les projets qui ont été faits? Maintenant, je voulais un exemple concret par rapport à, vous avez parlé des projets multimodaux. On sait qu'il y a Abidjan, Lagos, Praia qui sera faible, qui a peut-être fait. La partie ivoirienne a fini pour elle. On va attaquer bientôt peut-être pour Lagos. Est-ce que c'est un exemple concret de multimodaux que vous nous expliquez tout à l'heure? Merci beaucoup.
Merci. Je suis Anderson Karamoko du réseau ivoirien des leaders, RIL. Nous sommes une organisation de la société civile. Et là, ma question s'adresse à M. Joseph Mwanda, qui a fait une excellente présentation. J'aimerais savoir une chose. Vous avez présenté les corridors que vous avez bâtis. Vous avez fait un excellent boulot au niveau des infrastructures. J'aimerais savoir si l'IDEV prévoit un fonds de cohésion sociale qui va être financé et évaluer en même temps les projets qui mesurent la confiance entre les peuples, et qui va réduire les préjugés et en même temps favoriser la sécurité des migrants interafricains. Voilà. Je pense que quand je vous ai écouté, je n'ai pas vu cet aspect-là. Parce que on peut construire des autoroutes entre les pays, on peut faire beaucoup de choses, mais s'il n'y a pas de confiance entre les peuples, ça devient encore plus compliqué. Voilà. Donc, est-ce que au sein de l'IDEV ou bien de la Banque africaine de développement, on a un fonds de cohésion sociale qui permette aux OSC qui ont laissé des compétences pour évaluer la confiance entre les peuples? Voilà, c'est ce que je voulais donner comme... On a vu un peu ce qui se passe en ce moment en Afrique du Sud. Bon, c'est vraiment déplorable. Voilà. Il faut que vous avez bâti des ponts. Il faudrait qu'on mette l'accent sur le capital humain, sur l'homme qui est au cœur de ce système-là, pour qu'il y ait vraiment une réelle intégration humaine en Afrique. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. Thank you. Given the time we have, let's ask quickly the panelists to respond. I think the first question is more our approach for climate, different projects. How do we, integrate climate change in our operations so that all projects are related? Maybe just one quick answer, volunteer, and then there are 3 questions for IDF. One on the qualitative, how the methodology, how we do it. I think given the focus here is more about how do we scale the impact. So I think it's less frame, but I will leave there are about 3 questions. And the last question is trust. I think that's very important. Here, we have recently conducted the evaluation of regional integration in North Africa. And we know that even let alone people, some countries, they don't speak each other. So how do we operate in that context? We have, when you want to integrate, so I think trust, not just only between people, social cohesion, but even at a supranational and national state, how do we, as a bank, given our mandate, what we can do and what's beyond our control that we can. So there are some aspects we look, but it's a good question for reflection, but maybe let me quickly give to Joseph to respond quickly, and then the panelists, I will ask if you want to respond to the other 2. Thank you.
I will first respond to the question about can we convince the manager to include the climate fund in our project? Is it right? Yeah. I think the question we'll ask ourselves, what will be the cost of not integrated climate change in forest and transport project? It's not the cost of including, but what will be the cost of not including? Because if you didn't include the climate aspect in your project, it means that you will have a lot of issue with climate change. Will have a high cost for maintenance and so and so. So I think we are asking the wrong question. The question is no longer to see whether we need to integrate climate change in our project, because we know the cost will be higher if we don't integrate climate change. This is what I can say on that. Okay. On the methodology, I think you can understand we used to have quantitative and qualitative. And all our evaluation, we went to the field, we meet with stakeholders, we conduct interview, focus group, and so. So definitely we use quantitative and qualitative information.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I weigh in on the same issue of climate change, especially on transport projects? I think one of the biggest gaps that we've had in our design manuals is the information or the methodology on how to design for climate change. And I'm happy with the answer that has been given by my co-panelist. As governments, as executing agencies, as the borrowers for these funds, if we have updated manuals, we have updated methodology on how to compute and come up with designs that are climate resilient infrastructure, then it absolutely helps us to justify the case. I think one of the biggest problems which we have is the gaps in our manuals that actually guide us towards designing for climate change. And I must say that in one of our recent projects that I think implemented with the bank, we had a component for update and review of design manuals in Kenya. And we have now a manual and a proper guidance on how climate proofing of our projects is being embedded in our new projects. I've had a nasty experience of having done a piece of infrastructure, and as soon as we completed the road, about 1 kilometer of the road was washed away. And this is a really classic example of what happens when you don't do. Then there's a lot of rework on the section. It becomes extremely expensive. And we cannot ignore issues of climate change, and we must embed it in all our projects. Now, if that is the case, then it cuts out the discussion, because there will be a proper structured way of dealing with climate change as we design these projects. It should not come as an afterthought. Then, of course, the other issue that, can we measure emissions and of heat and all that is a very important, consideration. But let us also acknowledge that the continent is slowly coming up to adopt the electric vehicles, e-mobility. And very soon, issues of internally combustion engines will go down, and I think at the end, all these issues will be addressed finally. Thank you.
Thank you, Engineer Daniel. We have 5 minutes. Let me just recap. I will ask just one question each of them, the same question I will ask you, and just sentences. Just wanting to emphasize one evaluation finding, that's really comes and now informing the future action plan for the bank. We did two when we did evaluation of green growth and climate change. What we found is that even within the institutional arrangement, because when we did energy evaluation, most of the climate mainstreaming is well integrated throughout the process, because the VP responsible for is also climate, the same complex. Whereas the transport sector is in another complex. And when we evaluated the project, most of our projects are not climate proof. So I think sometimes within an institution, it's not only just mainstreaming, but where do we locate in terms of the institutional arrangement also matters. Otherwise, how we frame it, but it's one thing very important is that climate smart infrastructure is the future, because whatever you invest, if you see the cost is huge. So from the beginning, integrating that, it's not just a cross-cutting or to meet some global standard. It's economic, that is really makes sense and it's good for our regional member countries. With that, I will ask you one question quickly. That's on, if you advise, all the presenters, the regional member countries, to come up with the next generation of economic corridor initiative. What are the critical success factors that you advise to really, given the changing environment, the challenge, one thing you really advise your regional member countries in terms of the next generation of these economic corridors? I'll start with Daniel, and then Mtiande, and then Joseph.
Okay, thank you. Based on our experience in Kenya, what I would want to really advise is there should be more bilateral discussions to identify and develop one-stop border posts across the region, because sometimes the infrastructure is not enough alone. So the facilities that support the corridors, these networks become extremely important, and there should be collaboration between, the cross-border countries to ensure that the kind of infrastructure they set up across borders facilitate the trade, to ensure that the two corridors, the corridors on both sides of the countries do seamlessly work.
Yeah.
Thank you, session moderator. From the Southern African Power Pool perspective, our view is that there has to be a strong, empowered and authoritative regional institutions from a project approach perspective, in terms of the power pools, but also in terms of regional regulators. Our view is that the regional approach could add possibly more value compared to an inward individual country self-sufficiency approach. So I would advise policymakers at a regional level to relinquish or give a chance to regional institutions that are empowered to take binding decisions for the benefit of member countries. I submit, Chair.
Thank you. Let me use this opportunity. Maybe on the pool and the Southern Africa pool, just quickly, why Tanzania, Angola, and Malawi are not part of the pool? Just to understand.
Thank you for the question, Chair. It's really a historic matter. That historically these three countries did not have any sort of interconnection with neighboring countries that was strong enough to facilitate cross-border trading. And this is precisely why they are very high up in our project categories as priority countries to bring them into connection into the Southern African Power Pool. Malawi, by the end of 2026, will be interconnected. Tanzania, Zambia will be connected by 2029. In Angola, there's an active project that has just been signed up that will connect Angola to Namibia. So these are priority projects that we are actively working on to make sure that we bring these three countries into interconnection and they benefit from cross-border trading. I submit.
Thank you very much, Joseph.
I think all my presentation was around moving from infrastructure asset to system. So the first point, the first thing I would share with the decision making. The second thing is that we move from corridor to development corridor. It means that we need to go beyond just infrastructure and include our why. The why is to improve the population life. So if we want to increase the people's life, we need to include in our transport project, for instance, some ancillary work like health, education, because it's not just about road. People can see the road passing through the area, but if they are not benefiting from it, so I will advise them to do to have an integrated approach. System moving from infrastructure asset to system, and for central corridor to development corridor with an integrated approach.
Thank you. With that, I will thank the presenters. Thank you very much for your time, for your contribution. We have like 4 or 5 minutes break to move to the next session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, I think this discussion could have gone much longer, but I was just conscious about time because I wanted to give some room for the second evidence showcase. Yes, so as they do the photo shoot, I'm going to invite our colleague also working at IDEV, Miss May Mwaka. And May, she has been working at IDEV as a Principal Evaluation Officer since January 2021. May has over 20 years of experience in the field of monitoring and evaluation, working across Uganda, Rwanda, Guinea, Sierra Leone, and the Fiji Islands. She has been involved in country and program level evaluations across the health, education, governance, conflict, and natural resource management sectors. And she has also led various efforts in integrating learning and adaptive management practices at different levels. So I'm going to hand over to May, and she's going to call the panelists onto the floor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Christine, for that introduction. So we go to the next session. Okay, they've changed the picture. I was going to take a dig at Rafael. Anyway, so welcome to this next session as we go deeper into the evidence showcase. As we said, we are trying to move away from statements to the practicalities of implementation. So in this session, we are going to go beyond infrastructure. I think the first evidence showcase was more around the infrastructure goods, but we had the message, it's not just about infrastructure, it's a system, it's a service. So in this next session, we are going to go to the regional public goods, looking at them more collectively, to those that offer benefits beyond one country, those goods that require, to address cross-border challenges and require more collective action. So for this session, we're going to have it in 2 parts. We'll start off with a group of presentations that are very focused on findings from evaluations, and then afterwards have a panel discussion. So allow me to invite our presenters for the presentation, the first part, and some of them are here, but another is online. So our first presenter is Samson Wetohosu. Samson is our first presenter, a macroeconomist and evaluation expert with more than 18 years of experience in policy and strategy design and evaluation. Currently, he's a principal evaluation officer at the Independent Development Evaluation of the African Development Bank, where he has led several complex evaluations. He is also currently leading the evaluation of the bank's regional integration strategic framework. Welcome, Samson. And our second presenter is Mr. Golam Motaza. Golam, I hope you're online. And Golam is a senior evaluation specialist at the Independent Evaluation Department of the Islamic Development Bank. Golam brings nearly 15 years of experience across multilateral development banks with expertise in evaluation, strategy formulation, and partnerships. However, in his current role, he leads and supports evaluations of the Islamic Development Bank's policies, strategies, and country-level evaluations. Welcome, Golam. Thank you. So we'll start off, and then I will introduce the panelists later as they come on board. So we'll start with the first presentation by Samson. Thank you.
Bonsoir à tout le monde. Donc, comme l'a dit ma collègue May, donc, ma présentation va beaucoup s'orienter vers les biens publics régionaux. Et cette présentation est un peu tirée d'une évaluation qui est actuellement en cours, qui est l'évaluation du cadre stratégique d'intégration régionale de la banque. Donc, on a essayé de tirer quelques constats préliminaires pour aboutir à quelques leçons qui puissent informer une meilleure conception et mise en œuvre des biens publics régionaux. Donc, ma présentation va se décliner en 4 points. Next slide, please. Je vais essayer de faire un petit rappel sur le cadre stratégique qui est l'objet de notre évaluation. Je sais que la directrice d'intégration régionale a déjà fait la présentation du cadre stratégique ce matin. Je vais rapidement survoler et insister sur l'aspect qui concerne un peu les biens publics régionaux. Ensuite, je vais rappeler rapidement le cadre de notre évaluation et l'approche méthodologique qui a servi de base au constat préliminaire. Ensuite, au 3e point, je vais rappeler quelques constats préliminaires tout en prenant soin d'insister sur les aspects qui sont les plus pertinents pour les biens publics régionaux. Et je vais déboucher par quelques leçons, quelques enseignements qu'on peut tirer pour une meilleure mise en œuvre des biens publics régionaux. Next slide, please. Donc, le cadre stratégique de la banque qui a été approuvé depuis 2018 est structuré autour de 3 grands piliers. Le premier pilier, c'est la connectivité, donc qui touche un peu les infrastructures, notamment le transport, l'énergie. Ensuite, le deuxième pilier concerne l'investissement et le commerce. Et le troisième pilier concerne l'intégration financière. Je veux rappeler aussi que ce cadre est entré en vigueur presque concomitamment avec la ZLECAf, qui est un peu le cadre continental qui vise à promouvoir les échanges intra-régionaux au niveau du continent. Le cadre stratégique a insisté un peu sur les biens publics régionaux. Le cadre stratégique a introduit une définition claire et a rappelé 3 grands principes qui fondent les biens publics régionaux. Le premier principe étant l'aspect collectif. Donc, c'est un bien qui ne peut être produit que si l'ensemble des pays impliqués y participent. Ensuite, le deuxième aspect, le premier aspect, c'est plutôt que le bien public doit être un bien qui répond à l'intérêt public. Le deuxième aspect, c'est celui que j'avais mentionné plus tôt. Donc, le bien public ne peut être produit que si l'ensemble des pays impliqués y participent. Et le troisième aspect, c'est que le financement de ce bien vise à adresser ou corriger les questions de manque d'incitation. Donc voilà un peu quelques éléments du cadre stratégique qui touchent aux biens publics régionaux. Next slide, please. Donc au niveau des opérations régionales de façon globale, je pense que sur la période 2018-2025, qui est la période couverte par notre évaluation, la banque a investi presque 12 milliards d'unités de compte, et principalement focalisé dans les infrastructures à hauteur de 56%. Et le pilier suivant est celui du commerce et de l'investissement à hauteur de 23%. Et le troisième pilier est celui de l'intégration financière à hauteur de 21%. Donc, le premier pilier concentre au total 274 projets. Donc, ça a été le principal pilier du cadre stratégique. Les financements, les ressources proviennent principalement de deux sources de financement, des deux principales sources de financement de la banque, à savoir le guichet Banque africaine de développement, qui est le guichet non concessionnel, et le guichet Fonds africain de développement, qui est le guichet concessionnel. Et ce guichet intègre un mécanisme spécial qui est l'enveloppe régionale qui vise à promouvoir des incitations pour que les pays s'engagent dans des projets régionaux. Donc ici, on voit que la moitié des ressources financières proviennent du guichet BAD, mais en réalité, lorsqu'on raisonne en termes absolus par rapport au nombre de projets, je pense que ce guichet couvre 88 projets, alors que le guichet FAD finance au total 159 projets. Donc, en termes de nombre de projets, les engagements de la banque font beaucoup plus vers et proviennent beaucoup plus du guichet FAD. Enfin, je vais insister un peu sur, j'ai parlé tout à l'heure de l'enveloppe régionale. Au niveau de l'enveloppe régionale, il y a deux orientations. Il y a une partie qui finance les opérations régionales et une partie qui finance les biens publics régionaux. Donc, comme on peut le constater, généralement, les biens publics régionaux sont sous forme d'assistance technique, donc qui engagent des ressources moins importantes. Donc, on constate qu'il y a juste une part marginale qui va aux biens publics régionaux. Donc, au total, on a recensé environ 51 projets sur la période sous revue. Donc, voilà un peu le cadre qu'on a évalué et voilà un peu de façon schématique le portefeuille de la banque pour ce qui concerne l'intégration régionale. Donc, je vais faire un petit rappel sur l'approche méthodologique et puis déboucher sur les constats préliminaires. Next slide, please. OK. Donc, au niveau de l'approche méthodologique, notre évaluation s'inscrit un peu dans le processus d'apprentissage parce que le cas stratégique est pratiquement à terme, était censé venir à terme en 2025. Donc, notre évaluation devait générer des constats et enseignements pour informer la préparation du nouveau cadre stratégique. Donc, la période couverte, c'est 2018-2025. On a regardé tous les instruments de la banque, y compris l'approche d'opérationnalisation via les stratégies régionales d'intégration. On a revu aussi les instruments spécifiques que sont l'enveloppe régionale. Après, notre approche a intégré aussi les différents contextes. Donc, si vous regardez de l'autre côté, on a les 4 composantes méthodologiques. On a fait une revue de la politique, c'est-à-dire du cadre stratégique, et on a fait aussi une analyse comparative avec les autres institutions. Donc, on a intégré aussi un échantillon de projets pour aller voir un peu comment ça se passe sur le terrain. Donc, on va rapidement passer sur les constats préliminaires. Next slide, please. OK. Au niveau des constats préliminaires, on a constaté que quand même le cadre de la banque est assez pertinent et bien aligné sur les priorités du continent et aussi sur les domaines d'avantages comparatifs de la banque. J'ai mentionné tout à l'heure les infrastructures. Il y a aussi une certaine coordination avec les autres partenaires au développement. Maintenant, un aspect important, c'est que quand on se compare aux autres partenaires de développement, je pense que l'enveloppe régionale, qui est un instrument d'incitation, est une bonne pratique si on se compare aux autres partenaires de développement. Enfin, au niveau des biens publics régionaux, on a constaté que généralement, ces biens publics régionaux viennent en appui à des projets d'investissement afin de maximiser l'impact en termes de résultats de développement. Il y a quelques points d'amélioration. Par exemple, on a constaté qu'il y a une absence d'incitation financière au niveau des pays BAT. L'enveloppe régionale couvre seulement les pays FAT. Au niveau des projets, peut-être je vais insister rapidement sur le 3e point. Au niveau de nos discussions avec les différentes parties prenantes, il est ressorti que dans la conception de nos documents d'intégration stratégique, on engage beaucoup plus avec les entités régionales, ce qui est une bonne chose et qui nous permet de cibler les projets régionaux, mais avec une conséquence que l'engagement avec les pays est limité. Et ça a des implications après en termes d'appropriation et en termes de mesures complémentaires pour assurer une durabilité des interventions. Next slide, please. Des projets de rang. OK. Au niveau au niveau de l'efficacité, je pense qu'il y a des chiffres là-bas qui sont à corriger. Donc, je pense qu'il ne faut pas en tenir compte. La dernière version que j'ai envoyée n'a pas été positive. Donc, de toutes les façons, on constate qu'il y a un effet de levier important, et particulièrement dans le cadre pour les pays en transition, les îles et les pays enclavés. On a constaté aussi que la banque a délivré beaucoup de résultats au niveau des infrastructures. Je ne vais pas m'attarder sur ça. Je pense que la session précédente en a longuement parlé. Au niveau de l'intégration financière, on a vu aussi qu'il y a quelques résultats au niveau de la banque en matière d'harmonisation des systèmes de paiement et d'intégration des marchés de dettes. Et spécifiquement au niveau des biens publics régionaux, on a fait un focus sur le soutien de la banque à la mise en œuvre de la ZLECAf. Et c'est vrai que le projet a connu quelques retards au début, mais c'est entré dans une phase beaucoup plus active où presque tous les pays ont maintenant ratifié. Mais le problème qui se pose surtout, c'est que l'adoption et la mise en œuvre des différents protocoles au niveau des pays se fait de façon très lente. Ensuite, la banque s'est fixé un certain nombre d'effets en termes de soutien à l'intégration régionale qui ne sont pas encore totalement atteints, bien que les résultats sont sur une bonne courbe. Next slide, please. OK. Au niveau de l'efficience, je pense que j'ai mentionné un peu plus haut l'effet de levier. Il y a un fort effet de levier au niveau de l'enveloppe régionale, notamment via le guichet FAT, qui fait que l'effet de levier qu'on a estimé, c'était autour de 1,9. Donc, ça veut dire que si la banque met $1, c'est que ça génère 1,9 $. Mais par contre, l'efficience est limitée par quelques points qu'il est important de mentionner, notamment une supervision insuffisante et quelques défis institutionnels, notamment des problèmes de coordination, les capacités des unités de mise en œuvre des projets, tout ça. Au niveau de la durabilité, on a constaté quand même que la plupart des projets intègrent les aspects environnementaux et sociaux. Par contre, l'aspect le moins positif au niveau de la durabilité, c'est la durabilité financière et aussi quelques questions de manque de capacité au niveau des entités d'intégration régionale. Donc, je pense que sur ce point, peut-être qu'on va y revenir dans les leçons. Il y a deux cas. Tout à l'heure, on a parlé des pôles régionaux d'électricité. Je pense que c'est des entités où les résultats ont été très performants. Next slide, please. Donc, ceci étant, je vais revenir sur quelques enseignements déjà qu'on peut dégager de ces constats préliminaires. Le premier enseignement, c'est que lorsqu'il y a une consultation renforcée, une implication renforcée des pays membres dans la préparation du cadre stratégique régional, il y a une meilleure appropriation. Le deuxième enseignement, c'est que avoir un mécanisme d'incitation spécifique, ça permet vraiment de promouvoir les biens publics régionaux, notamment dans ce cadre où ces biens nécessitent l'implication de tous les pays impliqués. Les pays, parfois, ont tendance à utiliser leurs allocations pays pour les projets nationaux. Donc, avec ces mécanismes d'incitation, ça les pousse à s'intéresser beaucoup plus aux projets régionaux. Tout à l'heure, mon collègue a parlé des infrastructures. On a constaté que les infrastructures ne sont pas suffisantes. Donc, pour plus d'effets, il faut que les infrastructures soient complétées par des biens publics régionaux. Tout à l'heure, on a donné l'exemple du secteur de l'électricité. Avoir le câblage entre les différents pays n'assure pas une augmentation des échanges, une création de marché d'électricité au niveau des régions. Il est important d'assurer une harmonisation de régulation, d'harmoniser les contrats tarifaires, ainsi de suite. Donc, ces volets sont pris en compte par les biens publics régionaux et permettent d'avoir un bon retour sur investissement sur les projets d'infrastructure. Enfin, il y a les questions de capacité de gouvernance sous-régionale. Donc, voilà un peu quelques leçons qu'on peut tirer des enseignements préliminaires. Et je pense que je vais m'en arrêter là pour répondre aux questions éventuelles. Merci.
Okay, as this is coming on, I want to invite Golam to come on and make his presentation. And as we transition, we recognize just a very brief recap from Samson. He covered preliminary findings. So once again, we have here the preliminary, the emerging findings of an ongoing evaluation. But I think we do see similarities and common messages.
Hi, May. Thank you very much.
From
let me know
across.
you hear me.
Golam, are you ready?
Yes. Do you hear me?
We can hear you, but we can't see your slides yet.
Okay, let me share my slides.
Okay, IT, are you able to help?
Okay,
Thank you.
you can see my slides, right? You can see the slides now, right?
Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody, and good afternoon. First of all, thank you very much for inviting Islamic Development Bank for this important event of the African Development Bank. So I'm Ghulam Murtaza, a Senior Evaluation Specialist, Independent Evaluation Department of the bank, and I will make a short presentation of the thematic evaluation of ISDB Group Regional Cooperation Integration, RCI Policy and Strategy that we have conducted in 2024. With me, I have my colleague Yatashimul Hassan, who is also working in the Independent Evaluation Department and also ready to take any questions of this session. So in terms of outline, there are 4 sections of this presentation. First, we'll see the highlights of the ISDB Group RCI agenda, and followed by key findings, and then lesson learned, and finally section 4 will focus on major recommendations. So we start with the presentation on highlights of the ISDB Group RCI policy strategy. ISDB Group adopted its RCI policy and strategy in 2019, and it identified 4 pillars. Pillar 1 was focusing on enhancing cross-border connectivity. Pillar 2, improving the investment climate and competitiveness. Pillar 3, mainstreaming trade and Islamic finance. And Pillar 4, facilitating cooperation to provide regional public goods. At the same time, the strategy also identified 4 roles of the group as an advisor, which basically identifying pipelines of the potential RCI investments, and then financier, providing trade and Islamic finance. 3 is capacity builder and a knowledge broker, basically for assisting the capacity building programs, dialogue, and providing knowledge portals. And also finally, partner who are conducting technical and financial cooperation with international and regional organizations. There are 3 broad evaluation objectives. Number 1 was examine the relevance of RCI policy and strategy to the development strategy and needs of ISDB member countries. And second, assess the extent to which ISDB Group has institutionalized RCI within its operations and implemented RCI strategy effectively. And finally, provide recommendations to enhance the effectiveness of future ISDB Group RCI initiatives. Now, section 2, key findings. ISDB Group operations in RCI. Among key findings, during 2014-2023, ISDB approved 84 projects, out of which 63 were grants and 21 public finance projects amounting to USD 2.53 billion to support RCI operations. And majority of approved projects were in the transport sector, with a few in the energy sector and ICT sectors. Most of the approvals were Pillar 2, which was like cross-border connectivity. And then almost all project approvals were for single country RCI interventions. Then, as you know, that ISDB Group has entities, ITFC, ICD, and ISEC, which focus mainly on the private sector, have also implemented considerable RCI operations, focusing on trade, Islamic finance, and insurance guarantees. Assessment of RCI operations. In terms of relevance, approved RCI public finance projects are highly relevant to objectives of Pillar 1, which is cross-border connectivity. And grant projects are highly relevant to the objective of Pillar 2, which is investment climate. Then, however, the approved projects are less relevant with trade, Islamic finance, and facilitating regional public goods. So there are some critical gaps. No RCI projects focused on cross-border logistics centers, economic corridors, also parks, then regional investment funds and Islamic financial market integration, and improving natural resource management as planned. In terms of effectiveness, completed RCI projects were highly effective in achieving intended project outputs and outcomes. Assessment of RCI policy and strategy. The relevance of ISDB Group RCI strategy to the needs of ISDB Group member countries was high. However, there's a lack of familiarity among them about the ISDB Group RCI strategy. Member countries' expectations from the ISDB RCI operations have been found high, but have not been fully met so far. And the design of RCI strategy was also diverse, but missed certain areas such as agriculture, water resource management, infrastructures, research and capacity development. And there was also no evidence of regular monitoring of RCI strategy implementation. So these are the 5 key lessons learned we have identified. Number 1, delivering impactful regional public goods requires more than financing. So financing is just one part of all important requirements. It requires institutionalized and mainstream operational approach, which should be complemented by proper coordination, both internal and external, knowledge, ownership, again, both internal and external, and partnerships. Lesson number 2, regional public goods become sustainable only when they are anchored in clear institutional mandates and operational responsibilities. Regional cooperation agendas cannot remain sustainable if they are treated as broad strategic aspiration without clear institutional ownership. So functional system depends on internal governance arrangements that define like who leads, who coordinates, who finances, who monitors, and who is accountable. So that should be well defined. Lesson number 3, regional public goods need programmatic and holistic approach, not isolated operations. RCI pipelines needs to be prepared through sub-regional cooperation programs with concrete areas of cooperation and action plan. And a programmatic approach allows countries and institutions to build trust, align policies, and mobilize financing and sustain cooperation over time. Lesson learned 4, country awareness and ownership are preconditions for sustainability of regional public goods. Regional public goods are sustained when countries see them as part of their own development priorities, not as externally driven regional agendas. So it requires a strong country ownership, supported by regular policy dialogue, national, regional alignment, awareness among implementing agencies. And finally, partnerships and co-financing are central to the sustainability of regional public goods. Resilient regional systems are enabled by multi-actor governance coalitions, including MDBs, regional organizations, national governments, private sector actors, and technical agency. So sustainability therefore depends on partnership architecture. Who brings financing, who brings convening power, who brings technical expertise, and who supports implementation. Five major recommendations. First, it is recommended to strengthen institutional architecture by clearly defining roles, responsibilities, coordination arrangements, and accountability mechanism. Second, also strengthen knowledge and capacity building and technical support functions for regional public goods. Third, it is recommended to shift from isolated operations to more programmatic and sub-regional approaches for regional public goods. And fourth, enhance country awareness, ownership, policy dialogue. And finally, recommendation is provided to build a strategic partnership and co-financing platforms. So dear colleagues, I'll stop here. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Golan, for that and for keeping time. Yeah, we appreciate it. Okay, before we go to the next phase, just a very quick wrap up in terms of looking across the two presentations. We see quite a bit of similarities, and that may be because the institutions are a bit similar, but the takeaways for me are about institutions, institutional capacity, governance. It's about integration. It's not about assets alone or isolated investments, but integrated solutions. Ownership at the country level, at the regional level, at the personal level, I think we had that right from the morning. And then financing. And I think from Samson as well was what kind of incentives are we also building into this system? And then, of course, ultimately sustainability. Okay, thank you. So in the next session, we are going to have a brief panel discussion before we open it up to the public. And I'm going to invite our panelists. Firstly, in the room with us is Miss Victoria Fajemilehini Ayanle. I hope I have done your name justice. So Victoria is a senior regional operations specialist at the African Development Bank Group. She works on regional integration, regional public goods, and cross-border development initiatives with a focus on economic corridors, trade facilitation, connectivity, and institutional coordination under the AfCFTA. Victoria, welcome. Thank you very much. And our second panelist online is Michael Ward. Can we see him? And as he comes online, Michael Ward is a sustainability professional with over 25 years experience in sustainability, learning, and change. He's currently the head of evaluation and learning with the Climate Investment Fund, where he manages independent evaluations of major climate finance programs, supports global and regional learning events, and contributes to new knowledge and practices on just transition and transformational change. Michael, welcome to join us. Thank you so much. Okay. So Michael, you here as well? Okay, good.
I'm here.
Okay, thank you. So I'll start with you a question asking you to reflect on the two presentations you've just had from AfDB and ISDB and the examples they've listed. Given your experience with climate investment and regional public goods, what do you see as the most critical success factors to deliver results at scale? But also, more importantly, what should we be doing differently, really drawing on your experience in the climate investment world? Over to you, Michael.
Thank you very much. And to colleagues, it's a real pleasure to be here and to have seen the two presentations and read some of the background reports. I think I want to focus just very briefly on three areas that I think are key and that came up in both of the presentations. The first one is that infrastructure is definitely necessary, but really sufficient. I think that one of the things that we've learned from a number of evaluations across our programmatic approach and across our various programs is that regional integration should not be viewed primarily as an infrastructure challenge. Infrastructure is obviously the visible component of this work, but long-term outcomes will really depend on institutional governance arrangements, incentives, and stakeholder coalitions. And I think that both Samson and Gollum mentioned this. The second point that I wanted to highlight was that regional public goods really require a programmatic approach. And I think that this came up particularly in Gollum's presentation, is that regional integration works best when viewed as a long-term portfolio rather than as a collection of projects. So the CIF's, the Climate Investment Fund's programmatic approach, working with the 6 multilateral development banks with AfDB as an absolutely key partner in that, have shown over and over again that we really need a programmatic architecture that links planning, policy reform, and capacity building. And the last point that I'll focus on is that ownership really matters. And this came out strongly in Samson's presentation, is that ownership is not simply a case of consultation. It really requires countries to have a genuine agency in defining their priorities, sequencing the investments into a kind of programmatic approach. We use investment plans to do that. And the coordination of actors beyond government, so really a whole of society ownership of these initiatives. And yeah, I think that's it. And maybe one final point is around learning platforms. that, we definitely need the kind of financing platforms, but we also need spaces to share knowledge. And we recently worked with the African Development Bank, the World Bank, to host a global knowledge exchange in Addis Ababa that really allowed for peer learning. And I think that that's an area that we could probably work on more as we work to build these kind of programmatic and collective responses. Back to you.
Okay, thanks, Mike, for that, highlighting those factors. If I may follow up, and you did talk generally about investments, but what if we just focus on climate change? Do you have any unique success factors that one should consider for treating climate change? We do know it has some infrastructure, but I think it's also mostly a soft element. So any lessons or success factors or considerations for climate change?
Yeah, thank you. I think that the big lesson that we're learning is this need to build resilience into all that we do. So we also in Addis Ababa launched the ARISE program, a new program of the climate investment funds that builds on 17 years of experience in the pilot program on climate resilience, PPCR program. And in that, I think two kind of key areas of learning. The first one is that resilience needs to be built into infrastructure. The mention was made of building a road and then having the road impacted by a climate event. I think that as we think about how we, for example, strengthen grids, strengthen the infrastructure around renewable energy, it's absolutely vital that we think about resilience as we do that. But really importantly, we need to build the resilience of societies and ecosystems that societies live in. And there, again, we're going to need this regional approach to public goods. So we worked with AfDB, the World Bank, and the IFC with ZAMCOM, develop the Zambezi Watercourse program across 5 riverine countries that we're working with, 8 in total. And there again, the importance of thinking about how do you build resilience into what is essentially green infrastructure and a key part of the social and economic fabric of our societies. So yeah, to see resilience work as work across infrastructure, society and environment. Thanks, mate. Back to you.
Thank you, Mike. And I'll come back to that point later. So over to Victoria. Based on the examples shared, what does this evidence tell us about the institutional and governance conditions that enable these regional systems to be functional, coordinated, and resilient over time? I think the issue of institutions and governance has been a lesson across, both presentations and in the morning. So, what are some of those enabling conditions that enable them to function?
Thank you very much. And I want to say a very big thank you to the presenters, Samson and Golan, for sharing the presentation. And one thing that comes across to me is how similar the findings are. You talk about institutions, but these institutions are made up of people. There was a question from the audience earlier on where a man asked the level of trust, because for you to work with someone, it means you're able to trust them. And we're talking about 54 different countries, over 100 borders. And you're asking them to put aside or integrate their national systems into regional integration. And it's a big ask if you ask me, that why choose regional integration over operating in silos? But then in the Regional Integration Coordination Office, we look at it from the lens of the regional operations envelope, which you mentioned, Samson. And here it's a quarter of the ADF resources, which is 2.25 billion, and 15% of this is dedicated to the regional public goods. And every year we have a call for proposals. And the first thing that jumps out at us is the level of oversubscription. Before we had about 350% oversubscription. This year we had over 600% oversubscription for the RPGs. meaning there is a demand for it. As we have the downstream investments, we're also plugging in the upstream investment through the RPGs, and we work with the regional economic communities. And this is where they're very important, because if we work with ECOWAS, for instance, on the Abidjan Lagos study, before we put in the investment of Abidjan Lagos corridor that's in the pipeline, it means we're working with you to build your capacity, putting in place the PPP system. We're making sure that there is information between the 5 countries, even as we're thinking of building this corridor from Bingerville all the way to Lagos. What does it take? These are 5 different countries. So I will give a quick example. I had a colleague who traveled of recent from one West African country to the other for a conference. And she told me, Victoria, I filled the form before leaving the office. When I got to the border, I filled the same form physically. And then when I got to the hotel, I had to fill the same form again. Those are the same form 3 times. And on one part of the border is one language. Crossing over, there is the challenge of speaking another language, because this is another country that you're going into. And these are challenges that on paper, it feels like it's something that should be solvable, but these are real challenges. And then when you cross over as well, you need to change your currency, because the currency of your country is different from the currency of the country in which you were traveling to. And I asked her, were you frisked when you went through the borders? And she said, actually, no. At the borders, at the airports, they do that. But at the borders, no. So these are questions of how do we integrate the systems that have different languages, different currencies, different digital interoperability? How do we make sure that they fit into each other? An example is like a Lego block where you're fitting it together. Each one needs to fit in perfectly, irrespective of the differences. And that's what we've been able to do from ADF 13 to ADF 16. We are now in ADF 17. And we're putting these resources to make sure that either it's in setting up the AFCFTA Secretariat and encouraging the Guided Trade Initiative, either it's in financing digital operability through the WAMS and West African countries, either it's in even the Africa CDC and supporting it to make sure that COVID-19 then was contained between at least 19 ADF countries. We'll say, okay, it's across the borders, but a disease does not have a passport. It does not know what a border is. And if there's anything, I think COVID-19 has shown us that there is strength in working together, because the risk inherent in one country carries over to the second country as well. So the more we're able to trust each other, work together, then the better we're able to get, and a sustainable system in financing, in ownership of these systems as well.
Thank you for sharing those examples. And one of the ways you're doing it is through building the capacity of the regional bodies, across. But you also did talk about the importance of trust, information being available across, and balancing priorities between regional and country-owned priorities. What are some of the things that we can do to address that?
Okay, thank you. So Samson, you talked about the risk earlier on. One of the things we've done in the outgoing regional integration strategic framework is earlier in the year, we brought in all of the regional economic communities. And we asked the exact question you talked about: what has worked, what hasn't worked? And we had loads of feedback from them. And as we're developing the next, the succession strategy, we're putting some of this feedback in designing the regional operations, which are the other infrastructure, the roads, the bridges, but also the regional public goods, disease surveillance system, financial integration, payment interoperability. We're making sure that it speaks to so we have the regional integration strategy framework, but also it speaks to the regional integration strategic papers of the regions, the northern region, the western region, but also the country strategic papers that we have. And we found out that regional operations cannot work in a silo. Regional public goods cannot be assumed to work. And one thing we're also building in is building in the result framework into it. Because, again, I'll use the example of COVID-19 because we all lived through it. If it didn't happen, if it was just a little outbreak that was contained, we would not talk about the enormity of it. So even though we invest in the regional public goods and we put in the financing, it's hard to see what would have happened in the absence of these regional public goods. If we didn't have the disease surveillance system in place, what would have happened? So we're making sure we also capture the gains going forward, not just investing in this across the regions, but also making sure that we put numbers to it, we put stories to it, and that we're able to also scale up what works. So an example of another regional public good is TAT. So we know about this, about drought resistance yields. And in this instance, knowledge is the regional public good. It's what works in countries in terms of agricultural technologies, what have extension workers done in other countries that can be shared. And we've seen how successful TAT have been. We're now financing the third phase of TAT. And we've seen that the countries have been able to work together. Over 3 million farmers have benefited from this, over 29 countries. So this is another example of the RPGs that we financed, and we're taking notes and also, documenting the successes and the lessons we have as well. Technologies for agricultural, development, something more, transformation. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so as we wrap up this session, I'm going to ask one question from each of the presenters and panelists. Maybe I'll start with Golan. If there's one lesson on regional public goods that you'd want African policymakers and development partners to apply when designing the next generation of economic corridors, what would it be? So that's over to you, Golan, one critical lesson, then we'll come to Samson, and then Mike, and lastly, Victoria. Golan?
Thank you, May. I think this is very good question. I mean, we talked about ownership, right? So I think I will answer around that line. Like when you talk about ownership, is country owns this because it relates with its development priorities. And development priorities doesn't necessarily focus on issues within the country, maybe its relationship with other countries in terms of transport connection, energy connection, border connection for trade and all, even any other soft skills needed to develop the country. So that ownership from a country is very important. Then when you talk about the region, the ownership of the regional countries are also important. All the countries within a specific region should own that. They need to be connected more. So that kind of feeling they should have, and then have that kind of mentality to work together so that MDBs can help them to work together through a programmatic approach that we have been talking about. So I think that ownership to work together, I mean, that is a very important factor. They should keep in mind. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Golan. Samson, over to you. One quick lesson.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I would say domestic policy alignment. Maybe it's close to ownership, but what matters at the end of the day when you design a regional public goods is how each country adapt the overall framework to its own framework. Otherwise, whatever you will do, it will not work in that country. So what we realize, even for AfCFTA, the countries where there is progress is the countries where you have this internalization of the protocols in local legislation. So I think that one is very, very critical. And if you take all the regional public goods, I think at the end of the day, it will lie with the country. So I would say domestic policy alignment. Thank you.
Very much. And over to you, Mike. One lesson.
Yeah, thanks, May. I think that I would second both those points around ownership and domestic policy alignment. The one that I would like to maybe focus on is that, I think that really this programmatic approach and the fact that regional corridors, public goods, should be managed as really long-term programs that combine infrastructure, policy, harmonization, the point that Samson just made, institutional strengthening, stakeholder engagement, and learning. So we need to cover all of those in a kind of programmatic way, rather than focusing on a collection of individual projects. And it's really building that programmatic approach that I would like to see supported even more as we move forward. Thanks, Mike. Back to you.
Thanks, Mike. Victoria?
For us, in our DRI, the biggest takeaway for us as we design the next generation of regional public goods is to develop the bankability of this project, because they are upstream, they are supposed to be catalytic in nature, and also be able to mobilize additional finance, because we've seen financing and ownership is a big gap. And so for us, it's about how bankable are these projects. Not only are they ready to go to board before the end of the year in which it is prioritized, but then how over time does this catalyze other projects and other developments around it. And I would also say we also take the definition really seriously. Is it non-excludable? Is it non-rivalrous? And we're also looking at the next generation. Now we have artificial intelligence. What are we doing around artificial intelligence governance? So the sphere of regional public goods is evolving, and we're also making sure that even as we choose the most bankable projects, these are really forward-looking and solving the problems for now and the future.
Okay, thank you very much. Christine, do we have time for questions? Okay, one or two questions from the audience. Everybody's tired. Yeah. One question at the back. Thank you.
Merci. Je suis Raoul Tapé, je suis chef projet sur le WURI. Le WURI, qui est un des projets financés par la Banque mondiale, et qui a un caractère, on va dire, régional, parce que présent dans plusieurs pays de l'Afrique de l'Ouest. Et justement, parlant de biens publics, la question que je poserais bien, c'est, je peux demander sur la question de l'appropriation, parce que c'est quelque chose que nous avons également vécu et que nous vivons, pour savoir, ben, finalement, est-ce que on finit de concevoir le projet et on demande au pays de s'aligner, ou alors c'est plutôt à la conception que peut-être qu'il faut revoir pour justement s'assurer de cet alignement direct. Et également l'idée de finalement qui porte le projet. Est-ce qu'on le fait porter par les pays eux-mêmes, ou alors on veille à ce que justement les institutions sous-régionales, quand je prends par exemple, on va dire pour la CEDEAO, si on est en Afrique centrale, si on est en Afrique du Sud, on voit que l'institution qui l'a mieux appropriée pour porter ce projet-là. Est-ce qu'il ne faut pas plutôt mener la réflexion dans ce sens? Merci.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Ongonza Archis Ascristius. Je suis consultant suivi, évaluation et rétrohabitat apprentissage. Ma question est la suivante. Dans un cadre où les climats politiques, environnementaux et sociaux sont assez variatifs, comment pouvons-nous parler de redevabilité? Parce que la redevabilité, elle est horizontale, elle est verticale, et il y a souvent ce problème-là de rendre compte au niveau de la politique. Donc, comment, au niveau, par exemple, de la banque,
on veut parler de redevabilité parce qu'on parle d'appropriation, c'est vrai, mais s'il n'y a pas vraiment un système de redevabilité qui y va de pair, on ne peut pas parler vraiment d'appropriation. Donc, comment on peut parler d'appropriation et aussi de redevabilité dans ce cadre-là? Voici ma question.
Okay, thank you. Those are two questions a bit interrelated. The first one is about ownership. Where do we start? Do we start with the countries and design with them from the beginning, or design and come back to them and say, where do we fit? Okay, how do we harmonize and align? And the next question is, how can we address both accountability and ownership at the same time? Anyone wants to take that online? Mike, Golan, Victoria, Samson?
May, can I share a very brief example from the working with the Zambezi Watercourse Commission? As we worked with a number of the multilateral development banks to develop a regional program, the strategic work that the Zambezi Water Commission had already done was absolutely key. So we built the whole program off that strategic work. And that strategic work was guided by the individual country governments through ZAMCOM. So it really required individual country governments having a clear sense of what they wanted to do, a space in which they could come together, the Zambezi Watercourse Commission, and a recognition by key partners, multilateral development banks and UN institutions, that we needed to work with the strategic direction set by ZAMCOM. So it really requires a number of links that bring together country work into a regional space, and then recognizing the importance of that regional strategic work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victoria. Unfortunately, we're over time. So thank you. Thank you all for your participation. Thank you to the panelists and the presenters. I would like now to call upon Raphael to wrap up this session. Thanks again to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We had a really very fruitful deliberation. Thank you for the presenter, for the participants, for your valuable questions. I just tried to summarize key takeaway. I was attending the different conversation in the two sessions and taking some notes. So I'm sharing what I key takeaway from this conversation. How do we unlock the regional impact? Because this transformational impact. The whole session we are having this afternoon is that we talked about the regional economic corridor and also the regional public good. And that's to scaling the impact, transformational impact. So my key point first in terms of how do we unlock or scale the regional impact? You heard from the first session, the second session, build the system, not the asset. Asset is important, but it's necessary, but not sufficient. We need to build the system. So let's move from project to project, more on a platform project, integrated platform that really address this one. So build a system, not the asset. So this is one takeaway. Second, very important, no economic corridor without bankable pipeline. So the challenge we saw from the first session, there is no readiness. There are not projects, active pipelines. So it's very important that we take note if we want to really to unlock the impact on the corridor, economic corridor, and this public good, we need to have a bankable pipeline in terms of readiness, preparation, standardization, risk sharing. All this is part of that readiness. The third, beyond the hard infrastructure, the soft infrastructure decides the return for investment. I think this is also less hard infrastructure is very important. We saw the gap, but without the soft. Harmonizing rules. I was recently in Zambia, and then I was in Angola. So Angola, they speak Portuguese, and the DRC, French, and then we have Zambia, English. So they have the different standard. How do we, when we integrate, they have different rules. How do we harmonize? How do we standardize? How we do trade facilitation? How we do this capacity of the institution? These are beyond the hard infrastructure. If you want to unlock the impact, it's very important to really invest on the soft infrastructure. Other very important aspect is also govern regional public goods as a standing system. It's related with earlier, but here is about ownership. We know in Africa, always the fragility, the political instability. When the government changes, sometimes we change everything. So how do we make sure that we have that support and a clear mandate, a clear ownership? Because once they start this initiative, there are different points of view, and we lose that investment, return from that investment, and will be unable to unlock the impact. So this is very important. It's not just short term to deliver and to get volume, just we finalize, we have this. No, let's think long term. What is our short term, mid term, and long term? Let's this as just one-off projects. Beyond that, we need to. I think I have two additional final points. The other one is design these economic or developmental corridors for jobs and value addition. It's good to have roads, it's good to have access, it's good to connect, but when we design, we have a significant number of youth population. So it's very important to embed in the system, when we design corridors, what actually is the jobs, what kind of jobs we create, what are the value addition. So, so that we make infrastructure productive, not just just a transport project or energy project. Beyond that, let's make that infrastructure more productive. So if we want to unlock transformational impact to our regional member country beneficiaries, design corridor for job and value addition. And the last point, what stays unmeasured stays unmanaged. So if we not measured what's working well, is it working well, and if we don't adapt our platforms, our programs, then it's very difficult to learn and make adaptive programming throughout, because we saw some projects when we visit some initiatives, there was COVID, but there is no change in terms of the operation. But there is a significant change in terms of the priority of some regional member countries. How do we adapt to the changing environment? When we have trade tariffs, we had serious, when we had some security issues. So how do we adapt? So for that, we need to have that evidence-based, informing, making decisions. So how do we stay, learn, measure, and then that informs management to do corrective actions. So in closing, if we saw the cost of inaction for the Africa regional integration. Africa integration will be won less in what we build than how we finance, govern, and sustain together. Thank you very much. Overall, this is today's session. Thank you for the participants, the presenters, the audience, online audience, really appreciate and thank you for IT, translator, for colleagues organizing to make it work. With that, we conclude this session and see you tomorrow. Thank you very much.